Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here for the start of something very special, and that is the second season of the Ditto Draft League. Now, for anyone not familiar with the Ditto Draft League, this is a draft league hosted by none other than Jingles, and this is a Pokemon content creator draft league. This season, we will have 14 different teams, and I will put them up here on the screen so you guys can see all of the different creators participating in the draft this season. This is also going to be a doubles format. So for anyone who's unaware, this is going to be, a 6v6, right? You bring 6, you pick 4, and you battle in doubles, right? So 2v2 on the board at all times, which is going to be very, very fun. This season too, because we do have 14 teams as well, we are going to be having a top 8 in playoffs, which is going to be really fun because it does mean over half the players get to, participate. And it also means you don't need to have something like a, potentially 5-2 or a 6-2 record just to lock in your spot in the playoffs, which I do think is very good. Now, guys, of course, this is one of the very first draft leagues here in Pokemon Champions, and because of that, we decided to do a free draft. Essentially, what this means is there are no tiers, there are no points, you don't have a budget or anything like that like you typically would in other draft leagues. This is just simple. If it is available, it is there, you can take it, right? And personally, I think, this is really good just for one of the main reasons being that obviously Pokemon Champions is a brand new game. So I think having a tiering system, especially with such a limited dex, I don't think would be amazing, right? It'll be very limiting. So I am a huge fan of the free draft. The one big thing here to mention though is that Megas are locked. So for example, Garchomp and Mega Garchomp are two different Pokemon. If you were to draft Mega Garchomp, your Garchomp has to hold the Mega Stone, right? So again, we'll obviously get into that a little bit later, but if you do draft a Pokemon that, a Mega Pokemon, you have to hold the Mega Stone. You do not have to Mega it, which means, again, a lot of people here have drafted, multiple Megas, and again, they're definitely usable. But yeah, if you drafted a Mega Pokemon, you have to, hold the Mega Stone, and if you drafted a non-Mega Pokemon that can Mega, you cannot use the Mega Stone, right? So pretty simple there, right? As I mentioned though, we did have 14 players in this draft, and because of that, we obviously are doing a snake draft. For anyone, I guess, who doesn't understand how a snake draft works, so for example, if you have pick 1, you will get pick 1 in round 1, and then in round 2, you will get the very last pick, right? So I think that would mean you would have like pick 1, and then you would have like pick 28, but then you would also have pick 29, right? So that is what we would call a wheel pick, and so on and so forth, right? Until you get to the end of the draft. Now, the reason that is important is because your boy somehow, once again, has managed to pull the first pick. So really, really crazy. If you guys have followed the last, 2 draft leagues I've done prior to this, I think in the first season of the DDL, I had pick 3, and then I think when I played in the Iron Island Draft League, I think I had pick 1. So in the last 3 drafts I played in, I've had pick 3, pick 1, and then once again, I got pick 1 here in the DDL. Now, for me, this honestly kind of sucks. I actually hate having a top pick. I actually prefer having a pick towards the, the back end of the draft, not necessarily like the last pick in the round, but I personally would have loved something around pick 8 to 10. A big reason for that is like, one, everyone kind of gets to take whatever, good Pokemon they want at the start. But especially in a format like this, you do typically get a pretty good Pokemon around that pick 8 to 10. And then it also means you just get to pair it with a very good partner a bit earlier on. As I mentioned, one of the things I personally hate about first pick, especially in a league with 14 teams, is I had pick 1, and then I had pick 28, and I had pick 29, and then I don't get another pick for 27 picks. So it's very good for getting, I guess, a strong combination of Pokemon, but I also think it's pretty bad for, like, obviously getting 2 really good Pokemon. Now, without further ado, the first pick in the draft this year for me was Eternal Floette, or should I say Mega Eternal Floette. Now, honestly, I went back and forth. There was a bunch of different Pokemon I was looking at. Obviously, there was the, Mega Charizard Y, Gengar I thought was going to be really interesting. There's some pretty good non-Mega Pokemon as well, and you can, potentially save your Mega for later. But at the end of the day, I just decided to go with Mega Eternal Floette, simply because when it comes to Draft League, there are very few good Fairy-type Pokemon. Right, off the top of my head, of course, you got, Mega Floette. There's guys like Sylveon, Primarina, and kind of after that, there really isn't much. And Fairy Pokemon are just so valuable. It is arguably the best type in the game. And I think having a Pokemon with just these ridiculous stats it's just good, right? The special attack and special defense on this Pokemon are absurd. The speed stat is very nice. And while the physical bulk isn't anything crazy, it is still pretty solid. And of course, its ability, Fairy Aura, is also pretty damn broken. And especially when, you have access to moves like Moonblast, Light of Ruin, Draining Kiss, Dazzling Gleam, right? There's just a lot this Pokemon can do. Its coverage, honestly, is pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie, right? You go through its coverage, there's not much this Pokemon learns outside of the fairy moves that is actually good. There's a couple grass moves here and there, but realistically, you're probably just running either 3 fairy moves on this Pokemon or 2 fairy moves and Calm Mind. But honestly, that's all you really need. Floette is just an absolute beast. Again, its bulk is insane. Especially on the special side of things, its damage is absurd. It gets access to Calm Mind. Again, in my opinion, this is just one of the best Pokemon, period. Obviously, it is my main Mega going forward. And this is the Pokemon I kind of just wanted to center the team around. Now, for my second pick, I had to wait until pick 28, which isn't obviously the end of the world. But when it comes to fairy types, there was one thing in particular I really wanted, and that was a good ground type. Now, I had a bunch of different Pokemon I was looking at, of course, things like Excadrill were on my list. I was looking at Mudsdale, of course, Croak, right? You get Crocodile there with the Intimidate plus ground type. But the number one Pokemon on my list, of course, was Garchomp. Now, unfortunately for me, Garchomp went like pick 5 in the draft, but Mega Garchomp did slip all the way down to 28, and that is why with my second pick, I took Mega Garchomp. Now, I did not love the fact that obviously I had to take Mega Garchomp, because essentially for the most part, it just means my Garchomp for the whole season will be playing without its item. Now, I'm sure there'll definitely be times where I can use a Mega Garchomp, and honestly, Mega Garchomp stats are kind of absurd, right? Especially in a format where there are not that many damaging items. I do think Mega Garchomp is pretty good, and I'm certain there are going to be some weeks where I can run something like a Scale Shot set where I get that plus speed, obviously making up for the lack of speed that Mega Garchomp has. And then on top of that, its natural bulk is going to be great. Its attack stat at 170 is kind of absurd. But really, I drafted this Pokemon to use its base form. I think just base form Garchomp without an item is still one of the best Pokemon in the game. Has a really good speed stat. Its natural bulk is really good. And yeah, its attack stat, everything about this Pokemon is just fantastic. And again, it just pairs super well with Eternal Floette, right? When you think about the types that resist fairies, right? You got fire, you got poison, you got steel, all of which are weak to ground. So when you have a strong fairy type, it is a very, very crucial to pair it with a strong ground type. And in my opinion, at the time of my second pick, Mega Garchomp was the best ground type available. Now, as I mentioned, obviously I did have the wheel pick, which means I had the last pick in the second round, but I had the first pick in the third round. And because my offensive backbone with Floette and Garchomp was already kind of, pretty good, right? I had one of the best special attackers in the format. I had one of the best physical attackers in the format. It was about time that I got some support. Now, there was a support on my list this entire time, and that support was Maushold. And I'm very happy to say it did fall to me at pick 29. I do think this is actually kind of absurd that Maushold did fall to me so late into the draft. This Pokemon is obviously, as a support, just unbelievable. I think it's one of 2 Follow Me Pokemon in the game right now. Also one of 2 Friend Guard Pokemon, I believe, in the game right now. And it just has a ridiculous amount of utility, right? It gets Taunt, it gets Encore, right? It gets a bunch of different weather moves. There's just so much support this Pokemon has. And then on top of that, if some weeks I decide I want to do it, of course, there's always the option of going for something like Technician Population Bomb, just to do a ridiculous amount of damage. And there's also a lot of other cool things as well you can do with moves like Beat Up, of course, right? Potentially Stamina stuff, all that good stuff, right? Maushold, in my opinion, is just one of the best supports in the game. Obviously, knowing what you're going up against every week, especially in a limited, item format where potentially something like a Resist Berry, like a Chople Berry could be really good. Maybe you can run a Bulky with Citrus, Focus Sash, all that good stuff, right? I think Maushold is just a beautiful support to have, and I was really happy that this was the redirection Mon I got. Now, once again, of course, for my fourth pick, I did have to wait, I think it's like 28 more picks until my fourth pick, right? The last pick in the fourth round, of course, paired up with the first pick in the fifth round. Now, for me, it was pretty simple. I wanted 2 things with these back-to-back picks, right? I wanted Speed Control, most likely Tailwind, and I also wanted a Fake Out support. Now, I do believe with my fourth pick, I ended up going with Vivillon. Now, the reason for Vivillon is pretty simple. At the time in which I drafted it, it was the best flying type with Tailwind that was left. Obviously, pairs incredibly well with Garchomp, right? You have Tailwind with Earthquake, you have Friend Guard, which makes it even bulkier. You got options as well, like Compound Eyes, right, for things like Sleep Powder and Hurricane. And yeah, I think Vivillon at this point was just a really, really good pick for me to grab. And on top of that as well, I think there's only like 7 redirection mons in the entire game. So for me to have 2 of them when there is 14 teams, obviously a bit greedy. I know players were pretty annoyed at me when I took Vivillon. But again, I wanted to, again, just support the team, right? Vivillon, it has Tailwind, has Redirection, has Sleep Powder. I think it just pairs incredibly well with Garchomp as well. It's just, to me, Friend Guard's a pretty broken ability. Compound Eyes is also a really good ability. And this Pokemon just had a lot of utility, I think, to support the other 3 members of my team. Again, at this point, obviously, it is a bit scary to have, 2 redirection mons in my top 4 picks. But Vivillon, again, when I look at it, right, just the options it has with just Tailwind, Sleep Powder is fantastic. And also, there's not that many good flying types in the game right now. So to have a accurate Hurricane, even if it just, not the best special attack stat, but Hurricane is obviously a really good move. So just having such a powerful stab move like that, I think is great. It also offers healing as well with Pollen Puff and stuff as well. I think Vivillon in draft is just such an amazing Pokemon. Now, with the 5th pick, the partner I decided to pair with these guys was none other than Big Man Blastoise. Now, Blastoise, in my opinion, is just a beautiful draft Pokemon. Obviously, its bulk is really good. It does have access to Fake Out. It also has access to Flip Turn, so there are options, go for like something like a Fake Out setup move. You click Protect, you click Flip Turn, and then you get to play from there. Obviously, you have access to moves like Icy Wind, right? I believe it also gets Haze, which is pretty good. It just gets so much utility, right? Muddy Water is also a really cool move as well. Maybe there's some weeks you want to Choice Scarf it, right? Again, you've got that Icy Wind there. You got that, the Water Spout for big damage. It's just Blastoise, in my opinion, is just a great, just a great draft Pokemon. There's so much you can do, right? There's also Yawn utility. There's, what's the other one? The healing one I'm trying to think of here. Life, dude. Like, Blastoise just does a lot. And its bulk, again, is really good. Having a mono water with, like, the bulk Blastoise has is really nice. And again, while its damage isn't anything too crazy, obviously having moves like, Water Spout obviously is fantastic. But yeah, for me, I thought Blastoise was the best Fake Out mon on the board for me. And again, also being that it's a pure water type, obviously is very nice. Now, heading into the 6th pick here, right? I was originally just trying to find ways, again, to support the team. Now, I do think this is probably something I screwed around with a little too much, because I do think I actually ended up drafting too much support. I'll say that now, and I do think in the future there might be actually, need to be some moves around just to, obviously potentially bring some extra offense to the team, but we'll get to that shortly. But I was kind of just looking at ways where, I'm looking at the team and I'm like, okay, Floette looks pretty good, right? We have Redirection, we have Fake Out, all this good stuff, right? We have the mons we need to set up the Floette. I'm like, I need to find a way to actually make my Mega Garchomp better, right? And so I'm looking at, Pokemon with Sandstorm, right? I'm looking at Pokemon with, that are off the ground, stuff like this. And I'm looking at all these weird options, right? And it's really funny because, again, by the time you guys are seeing this, this was recorded probably like 3 weeks in advance. This draft was, 3 weeks early. And there was a tech I came across, right? Now, it's actually really funny how this ended up happening. So I guess to put this into perspective for anyone watching this, this was done, I think the draft was done like 2 weeks before the Global Challenge. And again, I'm just looking at like ways to buff my Garchomp. And I come across a Sparthra with Speed Boost and Skill Swap. And I'm like, oh my god, this is great. I'm just going to Skill Swap Speed Boost onto my Mega Garchomp. But then I started looking through a Sparthra's kit. And I forgot. It has Baton Pass, it has Speed Boost, it has Calm Mind, it has access to dual screens. And I was like, oh my god, a Sparthra is broken with Eternal Floette. I'm like, this is going to be one of the greatest combos ever. And I'm sitting there, I'm scared that someone's going to snipe a Sparthra from me, right? I'm thinking this is the Pokemon I need to pair with my Floette and also my Garchomp, because that's another thing as well, right? Passing a Speed Boost or 2 onto your Garchomp is very, very good. And again, in draft, right, I can run a Dark Resist Berry, right? I can run like a Citrus. I can run a Sash. I can run whatever I want. I can play like dual screens of Sparthra with the Baton Pass where I lead it, I get up a Reflect, I get up a Light Screen, and then I pass +2 speed to my Garchomp, right? There's a lot of different things you can do with this mon, right? It gets access to every weather. It gets access to Psychic Terrain. Like, this Pokemon's move pool is absolutely absurd, and I cannot believe I got it with my 6th pick. Like, I actually think a Sparthra, low-key, is one of the best draft Pokemon in the game. After looking at it, like, it goes so deep, right? It gets moves like Ally Switch, Baby Doll Eyes, right? It gets Feather Dance. There is just so much this Pokemon can do that I'm just, like, shocked that it stuck around as long as it did, honestly. I think a Sparthra, especially for draft, is one of the best Pokemon in the game. Now, to go with the Sparthra here, I ended up picking Orthworm with my 7th pick. Now, the reason behind this was, like, one, there wasn't that many Steel types left on the board. Obviously, 2, I also just wanted Pokemon I could put next to my Garchomp. So, obviously, with Earth Eater, you could just spam, Earthquakes, heal up the Earthworm there, and it's very good. Obviously, again, Shed Tail, right? Passing that to something like either a Mega Garchomp or a Mega Floette is obviously very, very good. And again, you just have things like, Iron Defense, Body Press, right? You have a Stab, Heavy Slam, all this good stuff, right? Earthworm, to me, it just felt like a really, really solid pick for my 7th pick. It kind of fit what the team needed. In hindsight, I have thought about this a bit, and maybe I should have gone for a different Steel type, maybe something a bit more offensive. But I do think Orthworm in the right game is still going to be very, very devastating. Now, heading into the 8th and 9th pick, there was 2 big things I still really, really wanted, right? I wanted a Fire type, and I wanted Intimidate. Now, there are a bunch of different Fire types on my list, right? Mainly Fire and Ghost types. And the reason I wanted Fire and Ghost is I just felt that this typing offensively paired incredibly well with my 2 main offensive pieces on the team, obviously being the Floette and the Garchomp. And I ended up settling on Ceruledge. Now, Ceruledge is just a fantastic Pokemon, right? Its bulk is pretty good. Obviously, it has a really nice attack stat. It has some nice abilities. Its speed's not too bad. Bit of Blade as a stab move as well is actually pretty nice, right? Good damage. Obviously, the healing is fantastic. You got things like a stab Poltergeist, stab Shadow Sneak. It also gets access to bulk up. So there are a lot of things Ceruledge has that I think is very good, in particular, especially when it comes to supporting this team. And that's why I took it, right? Obviously, I wanted a Ghost type. I wanted to be able to lead something into, opposing Fake Out teams and just say, hey, I can pressure you here on turn 1. And on top of that, it also just has a lot of great, great moves, right? It does get things like Brick Break, Close Combat, right? It also gets moves like Curse, Disable. Like, there's a lot of different things that Ceruledge has that I think makes it very, very interesting. And then for my 9th pick, again, this was kind of like a combo pick, and I was just looking at the mons that were left that had Intimidate, and honestly, Tauros Blaze was like the only mon left at this point that I'm like, that is a good Pokemon. So I ended up just taking Tauros, right? Obviously, doubling up on fire types in back-to-back picks didn't feel amazing. But again, at this point in time, I didn't have a fighting type already. I didn't have an Intimidator. It was the best Intimidator on the board. So I was like, you know what? Let's just keep it simple, right? Obviously, I have 2 fire types, but having just a decent fire type, right? Especially one that is a natural choice scarf, because that's another issue I had, right? I'm like 9 picks deep, and nothing on my team really wants to hold the choice scarf. So I was like, you know what, Tauros, it's decent, right? Obviously, it has Intimidate, which is obviously very good. Its physical attack is not bad at base 110. Its speed at 100 is also okay. Its physical bulk's not bad. Its special bulk, obviously, leaves a little bit to be desired, but it certainly isn't too bad. But the main thing was it has Intimidate, it has Flare Blitz, it has Close Combat. Its damage is absurd. It has Raging Bull as well if I'm worried about my opponent playing screens. And then it just has a bunch of different coverage moves. So I was very, very happy to get Tauros with my 9th pick. Then heading into the final pick of the draft, there was honestly a few different things I wanted, and unfortunately, there was no one Pokemon that really fit everything, right? I wanted a second Fake Out mon, because obviously, as good as Blastoise is, I can't always bring my Blastoise, right? If my opponent has, just some really good Pokemon into water types, it just makes it a bit difficult. And then on top of that, I also wanted a Pokemon that had access to coaching. And the reason I wanted coaching is to, one, either potentially just, coaching up, of course, my my Garchomp, or, potentially just like side coaching my Sparthra while it's trying to set up, right? Obviously, being able to pass something like a defense boost to a Mega Floette, I do think could be very, very clutch, right? Obviously, Floette's physical defense isn't the best, so having access to moves like coaching plus, Intimidate, I do think would have been fantastic. I am actually a little upset that Tauros Blaze doesn't have coaching, because I think that would have actually been really good, where, potentially just send out like a jolly Tauros Blaze, side coaching my Floette, feeling pretty good about that. But yeah, we ended up going with Medicham. Now, Medicham honestly has a few different things that I think make it pretty interesting. Obviously, one, it has Pure Power, which I'm not going to lie, when I first drafted Medicham, I looked at this thing and I said, base 60 attack is just atrocious. Like, even with Pure Power, this can't be good. But even if you run a Jolly Nature with 100 and basically max attack Jolly hits 112, which with Pure Power that doubles it up to 224, which is like actually just absurd. Like, when you think about it, right? Like, that is literally like more than base Garchomp, which is like kind of nutty, right? Like, that's a lot of damage, right? Like a Mega Garchomp with a Jolly Nature has the same amount of damage, and that's a Pokemon with 170 base attack. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. Also, with a Jolly Nature, you do hit 145 speed, which is also not too bad. This Pokemon has really bad bulk, so it is naturally a Pokemon that does want to hold something like a Focus Sash or a Choice Scarf, so that's certainly not bad there. As I mentioned, right, it has access to Fake Out, right? It has access to coaching. It also has access to a Stab at Close Combat, which again is very, very good. And then the other interesting one that I actually really liked is actually Skill Swap, because again, we talk about this Pokemon I have on the team, this Mega Garchomp, and it's pretty bad ability, right? I granted I do have ways to set up the Sand if needed, but realistically, Sand Force is just never really getting used, right? Sand Force is not an amazing ability, so having something like a Pure Power Skill Swap, I do think is very, very good. But yeah, guys, that is my draft. I do think there are definitely things I need to look at as the season progresses. A big one here is obviously I do not have a Grass type. I do not have an Electric type either, so opposing water types definitely look a bit, hard for my team. And, there's obviously a couple little things here and there. I am worried about my lack of just damage on turn 1, really. Obviously, Garchomp and Floette can both deal quite a bit of damage on turn 1, but my team is built to support these Pokemon, so that kind of, automatically makes me think, oh, click Calm Mind, click something like Swords Dance. So I'm going to have to wait and see how things go. I am not 100% sold on this. I do think there are moves I can make within this team. But for right now, I do feel pretty good about it, right? I have the 2 centerpieces of the team being the Floette and the Garchomp, and I just have a lot of Pokemon around them that are able to basically enable them. So yeah, guys, that is going to be the draft. Obviously, if you guys are excited to see the next season here of the DDL, and especially if you're just excited to see Draft League or battle content in general, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know it means the world to me. And yeah, let me know down below what you guys think of the roster. I do think I've done a pretty decent job here at building around the Floette. I don't think this team is anything too crazy by any means. Obviously, I have arguably the best Pokemon in the game with that Mega Eternal Floette, and I just have a cast around it to just kind of enable it. So yeah, that was kind of the idea going into this. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. And obviously, of course, make sure you guys check out the other creators within the league too, because we're all going to be making content on it. We're all going to be having a lot of fun. And I'm honestly just super excited. I've been having so much fun playing Pokemon Champions. So yeah, for me, this is just unbelievable. I'm so excited to actually jump in and play. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's it for this one. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.